Okay, well, thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to have our guest this month. We have Rich Moniz from Rich Insights, and it's going to be a great talk. If you're not familiar, we do a community call every month for Brand Pollinators, and we like to bring in a guest expert who can help us cover a topic that is relevant to our audience. So we work with a lot of impact driven founders of commercial or consumer packaged goods. And so this week is going to be great because Rich has a lot of experience working in consumer insights. So he's going to be able to kind of answer a few questions for us, hopefully, and share a little bit about how he does his research. So Rich has dedicated over a decade to this research industry with a specific focus on eye tracking technologies. And throughout his career, he's collaborated with tons of different companies, from global to smaller CPG. And his expertise lies in using cutting edge technology to gain insights into consumer behavior. So he pioneered the development of an innovative testing solution for interactive shopping and virtual reality. And these tools have helped the clients that he works with to get a more competitive advantage and help them do new product launch or redesign packaging so that it's most successful on the shelf. So Rich is also deeply committed to creating a positive impact in the world, which of course we love. He's got 3 daughters and really wants to make sure that he's doing work that's leaving a legacy in a better world for them. So love it. And then of course, one of the initiatives that he does through his company is to plant trees with every study that he does. So a really cool way to have a service-based organization giving back. So thank you, Rich, for being here.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm honestly super excited to talk eye tracking. You know, I can't wait to field some of these questions coming up, and I've already gone through and looked at a lot of the questions we're going to be talking about. I've made tons of notes. I'm almost worried that we have too much to cover. But yeah, we'll get through as much as we possibly can today.
Awesome. And if you have
Yeah.
questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the chat or, come off mute and ask us if there's something specific. We'll do our best to get an answer for you. I'm sure some things may not be as easy to answer on the fly without doing some actual research, but we'll do our best. Okay, awesome. So just to get us started, you're working with customers, like the idea that they're coming to a certain part of the store and are they looking for something specific when you're working with them, or is it just like what do they see when they're looking at that shelf?
So I've been involved in both kinds of research. What I do now with using online technology for eye tracking, it's a lot more focused on the section. So we sort of drop them into the section that they're looking at right away. But I've done in-store work where we're literally putting a pair of glasses on a shopper before they go into the grocery store. And it's like, go ahead, go on your shopping trip, and we're just going to watch what you do. And the beauty thing about eye tracking glasses is it's very non-invasive. Like once they put them on, you don't have to interact with them or touch them or go near them, for the rest of the shop. So, at the beginning, they might be conscious about it, but they forget very quickly, and you notice that behaviors start to come through really naturally, and encouraging people to use phones, or we've even been on recruits where we've recruited parents with kids just to see that level of interaction, like how much attention is actually paid to kids versus products. And a lot of brands sort of have this mentality of people are focused on shopping the entire time, but the reality when you go into a store is their attention is everywhere, right? Especially if you're a parent with kids, your
Yeah.
focus is almost half the time just on your kids, on your phone, on shopping lists, on flyers. The total attention that can be paid to something on the shelf or signage gets reduced really quickly when you see stuff like that.
That's a really good point. And I love the fact that, the glasses aren't very invasive, so they can just kind of wear them and get used to them easily. And I feel when I'm trying to do something objectively, I just start like overthinking it. But if you're walking around the store looking at stuff, like your eyes are just going to go places. And you're not going to be able to say, like, oh, yeah, I spent 20 minutes looking at the back of this package. Like, your eyes aren't going to lie about that.
Exactly, exactly. And it's through like years of working with multiple methodologies, whether it's straight questionnaires or interviews. I've used EEG headsets where you're, putting a wet cap on people's heads. Like we've spanned the gamut of technology trying to get a read on what shoppers are doing and get a better look at their a little more insight into their behavior, right? Because it's one thing to have someone state something, but to get a peek inside what's actually happening under the helmet, in their head, that's invaluable. And over the years, eye tracking has been one of those things time and time again I've come back to because it's so reliable in terms of predicting success or failure, and improving on what exists. It's been very, very reliable. If I ever had a study that came down to, people talking about on a scale of 1 to 5 and rating a bunch of things on metrics, as opposed to I have all of the eye tracking metrics here that point to a certain package as winning, I'm going to tend to rely on the behavioral metrics and then color some of the reasoning with some of that other qualitative stuff. But eye tracking has always been extremely reliable, and like you said, you don't lie. If something's noticed, it's noticed. If it goes unnoticed, it's tough to lie about something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things I think that's been really challenging, especially in this like impact driven sustainability natural product space, is that we hear through surveys and whatever that consumers are really interested in purchasing more sustainable products, but then it doesn't always translate to what they actually purchase. So does the eye tracking study have like a strong correlation to what they end up purchasing? Or is it just more like this is what is going to catch their attention first?
There's definitely a correlation, but there's almost two ways of chunking up eye tracking. And there's two ways I approach the study too. There's more of a macro view of how does a package stand out in its environment. And then there's a more micro view of how well does it communicate what it needs to once it's noticed. So it almost has to break through, it has to do two main jobs. The first job is just to get noticed on the shelf. And that's a huge job. When you think of the grand scheme of the entire store, you have a fraction of a percentage of shoppers that are going to notice your package on the shelf, especially if it's a smaller footprint. If it's something huge like Tide in the home cleaning section, there's a good chance that anyone that goes down that aisle is going to see it. But when you're talking about one or two facings in a 40-foot aisle, it's fractions of a percentage of shoppers that are going to notice something. And then at best 1 to 2 seconds of attention on that product, and that's if they're in a browsing mode where they're sort of open to exploring that kind of thing. If they're stuck on a specific searching task, it's going to be much more difficult to break through, and you're going to receive much less attention if you're not what they're looking for exactly. So correlate, your original question, is there a correlation between standout and purchasing? Definitely. The more likely something is to get noticed, the higher the chance that it's going to get purchased. Where we can see that break down is with eye tracking. So I've been involved in lots of studies where we've tested multiple designs, and one of those designs has actually broken through very well in terms of being noticed. But then behaviorally, it doesn't get picked up, it doesn't get purchased. People move on very quickly. So without eye tracking, you would never have even known that there was something successful going on there, that you're potentially missing just based on your metrics of, oh, this one was purchased the most, so it's the winning idea. Well, that's great to have that, but there might be some ideas you can take from that package that's doing a good job standing out on the shelf. It might just be falling flat because it's too busy or it's not communicating what it needs to when it's noticed, but it is doing that first thing very well. So, whether it's the color or the shape or some particular graphic, and we can easily understand that with eye tracking because you can see what's capturing people's attention. But those kinds of things, they'll get missed if you're just testing package designs and asking people questions or just observing what people are doing, behaviorally based on purchases and things like that. You're going to miss. You're leaving some of that information on the table. And one of the things I absolutely love about eye tracking is it helps you learn from failure, where you don't necessarily have that opportunity a lot of the time, and you might not even be aware that there was the potential for that opportunity a lot of the time. So yes, it does correlate. The more people you can get to look at something, the better the chance that they're going to buy. If that correlation doesn't exist, then there's usually a reason why, and it's very simple to see that correlation is breaking using eye tracking.
Oh, that's really such a great point, because if the packaging isn't doing a good job communicating, then it's like, wow, what is this? And they look at it and a little closer and like, I don't know, like looks cool, but I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
Then that's where the problems come. That makes so much sense. So how does that mean that people have to actually pick up the package to be able to understand that communication, or should there be like clear communication completely on the front of the package?
Definitely. You definitely want the front of your package to communicate as quickly and as simply as possible. When I'm testing and through the years when we've tested packages, we'll look at the macro metrics in terms of, what percentage of shoppers noticed your pack on shelf, what order did it get viewed? So, what other brands are noticed first, things like that at the macro level. But at a more micro level, your package needs to communicate very simply and very understandably to your shopper in order to get them to pick it up. So that's that second step in terms of the communication, and how people visually digest a package becomes super important at that point. If you can imagine that, you only have a small fraction of a percentage of people who are going to notice a package, and then if they happen to glance at it, they're only giving it 1 second of attention. You want to make sure that your main messaging, your main sort of selling features can be communicated in less than a second.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a bunch of fancy graphics and your package is very nice and beautiful and busy, can someone look at that package and understand what it is and its value prop within a second? And if the answer is no, you might want to go back to the drawing board there, because your package is likely a little bit too complex.
Mm-hmm.
You see it with signages, you see it with packaging. I think the only package in the history of packages that is the exact opposite to that is the Dr. Bronner's. Like, their packages, they're filled with content on the top, but that's part of their look. So
Right.
their entire brand is like that. And I don't think they're expecting consumers to read all of that content. But it's, a part of their look now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I would say, minimalism is a better practice. But then understanding how you can drive standout in your category becomes extremely important, right? What works in pasta sauce might not work in energy drinks, right? I've seen some interesting sauce companies coming out with very bright, colorful packaging now that's doing a great job standing out, among those white labeled red jar standard that's in that category. But if
Yeah.
you bring that to energy drinks, that's already a rainbow of color and you're just going to blend in.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because if you're in the pasta sauce aisle and there's all these other pasta sauces there. It's not a big leap to see something that doesn't look like a typical pasta sauce jar and already know that it's pasta sauce. You know, like you can look at it and it's like, it doesn't look familiar right away, but it's surrounded by pasta sauce. So you're like, what is this, a pasta sauce? Like, I feel like that catches your attention. But like you said, in the energy drinks, there's already a lot going on there, and being like more simple and clear, like this is an energy drink, helps people understand, because I feel overwhelmed in some of those aisles where there's kind of a lot of variation within the category. And it's like, wait, does this have like caffeine in it? Or is this like functional? Or what am I looking at here? So yeah, that it makes sense that it depends kind of on the aisle that you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And whether, how important is it to show off flavor and some of those benefits. There's trade-offs there. Obviously, you can't make everything the main message on the front, and a lot of brands try to do that, but if everything is presented, then nothing is presented. I've done a lot of studies in stores where it's interesting. You see the same kind of thing happening at an aisle level, where you could walk into an aisle, and if it's full of price tags on one side, nothing's on sale, really. But if you walk into an aisle and one or two items are marked with sale tags, they immediately draw your attention, and you look, oh, what's on sale? It's the same thing with packages. If you have too
Yeah.
many messages on that front, it just becomes nothing. It becomes white noise, and it's skipped over.
So does it matter like where vertically the stuff is on the shelf? Because it seems like stuff that's at eye level would be much more noticeable and a much easier lift for the customer to just be walking along and be like, whoop, there it is, what I want, versus like stuff that gets relegated kind of to one of those lower or very top shelves.
For sure. And I mean, like, if we're up to any brand, having the biggest brand block possible and being at eye level would be the two ideal things you want, because those things help improve the amount of people that are going to look at you by a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
Being at eye level, if you could see a heat map of store shelves in terms of where people visually look, those middle three shelves are lit up. And then as soon as you move further away from that extreme, it becomes dead zones. So bottom shelf is typically a dead zone, and top shelf is typically a complete dead zone, which is why you see a lot of stores take advantage of that by putting some of the larger items on the bottom, like club stuff. Same with the top shelf, like it might be an overstock shelf,
Mm-hmm.
because it really isn't shopped all that well. And if you exist on there as a brand, you're going to need to do extra work and make sure your package is working extra hard
Mm-hmm.
to stand out there. Some of the things that are more controllable, if you can be placed beside the big visual anchor of the aisle, that's fantastic. If you can have a placement that's either to the immediate right of a large visual anchor to that section, or almost picture a reverse C, because that's typically what people do is they'll hit on a visual anchor and then start to sort of scan out like this around the shelf when they're in a searching mode.
Mm-hmm.
When you're browsing through the store, it's almost just like a zigzag up and down as you go through the aisle very quickly. But when you're searching, it's more of a reverse C pattern. So being sort of immediately adjacent and then underneath and then around that visual anchor can be a huge advantage. But other things that can give your product an advantage are just things like owning a unique color in the category, or a range of colors. If you're going to denote different flavors or sub brands, things like that. Owning a unique shape. So just having some sort of unique packaging or a unique size in the category is a great way to draw attention. It's just, if you imagine yourself sort of looking at this shelf of packages that are all the same size and one is twice as big, your eyes are much more likely to be drawn to that package, right? So just playing at those kinds of things. And I've seen some companies do that really well. There's a Canadian company that makes an energy drink right now called Revita, and it's in a pouch. So if you can imagine a pouch, sitting on this shelf with, among a bunch of cans, all of a sudden it's like, wow, what's that pouch? It's almost like a cheat code where, and now I've noticed some companies are starting to copy the pouch idea. So, that's bound to happen. But it's initially it's almost like a cheat code. If you can own a color or a shape or a size, um, that's a great thing to have in
So,
your category.
yeah, to go on a slight tangent here. So it made me think of High Bar. We have Nora on the call here, and their product, it like their packaging has a picture of the soap on the outside, like the shape of what it looks like when you open the package. And I think that really stands out because it shows what it is. And I tell you, I have the product at home, but I was at a friend's house and I stayed there for the weekend. And when I was using their shower, they had the High Bar soap, and I knew it was High Bar because of the shape. And so
Mm.
it made me also think like, okay, so does having a picture of what's inside the package help share the message of what it is? I mean, I'm sure in certain categories it makes more sense than others, but
Yeah, it can. And I'm looking at their package images right now. It looks very cool. The other thing that it does very well is it's a unique shape on the package. So unique shapes are another sort of cheat code, right? Like if you can have something that's rounded as opposed to square, that's much more likely to draw the eye. I find that a lot more relevant when it comes to things like signage. If you have a shelf talker or something like that, like adding a rounded edge to that can really improve that. But here, this package, it's a square package, but then it has a very prominent shape on the front. It helps distinguish flavors. It helps unify the brands and all the different scents together. I think it's a pretty good design in terms of calling out what it is on top as well. Um, it looks like there is quite a bit of content on the front. I potentially consider reducing the amount of words. There is a lot to consume there visually. So reducing that and then saving that content for the back, because the first goal, get noticed on shelf, get understood, and then you can get picked up. Once you're picked up, then you can put all the messaging you want all around the package. You can have your story on the back. You can, once they're engaged, that's when you have their attention. You can put whatever you want on there. But getting it to work to do that first thing.
yeah, that makes so much sense. So I know when I've done a little bit of package design in the past, and remember we had a debate about whether to include like pictures of the ingredients for like the food product or to have like an actual picture of what the final product looked like. Do you have any insights on like how that does?
That that's varied
Yeah.
based on category a lot. Whether it's a product image or a window into the product. Sometimes that's just an effective way, or it's a clear package where you can just see the product.
Hmm.
Um, I think in most of the research I've been involved with, if flavor is sort of an important part of your consumer decision tree where flavor is going to be a top consideration in that set, then usually including an image is a very powerful tool. I've seen companies where they've had gone from a small image or no image to showing an image, and the noticeability has skyrocketed on the shelf because it was almost largely ignored before. And then you go to understanding what it is or better distinguishing flavors, things like that. So one brand that just recently did that I really love their new package is Snack Conscious. They had like it was a very plain, bold color package that sat on the shelf, and it's very noticeable. Um, but you had no idea what was in there, right? Until recently, when they've actually started adding a lot of huge imagery onto their packaging. Now you get it right away, what it is and what it is, what's in it, and it meets those sort of craving needs. If I'm in a browsing mode and I'm open to maybe try a different product, I'm probably not going to look at one that doesn't show me what the product is if it's something brand new that I might not understand. Just the other day, I actually didn't buy a cereal because I didn't know what the cereal looked like, and it was for my daughters. And um, you know, they're weird about some certain shapes and things like that. So without seeing the cereal, I was just like, well, I can't make this choice until I go home and actually look it up.
And it's so funny because it's like it's kind of a minimal risk. Like you spend $5 or whatever on a box of cereal and see what it's like. But so many consumers, and I do it myself too, you're just like, ooh, like I don't, there's just this mental block of, and everything in the grocery store costs money. And so, if you add in a bunch of things that you're not sure what they are, then you end up spending, you know, 20, 30, 40 extra dollars on stuff that you're like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah, and for me, I'm always trying new stuff. Like
Yeah.
I'll see a new brand and I'm throwing it in my cart all the time. I get a lot of trouble for that from my wife, but
So
um,
another question about the packaging. So if there's limitations on being able to have a window or something like something that's sensitive. So Jessica brought up she has Lucky 22 Spice Company. So her jar is actually like an amber glass because it's protecting the spices inside. But
yeah.
she said people have asked like, oh, is this a sauce or because they can't see what's in there. So do you have any insight onto how to deal with like needing a certain type of package to protect the product?
I I haven't done a ton of work with stuff like that. And I mean, you're sort of just falling into those guidelines anyway, right? So whatever you're sort of forced to work with, you don't have much choice outside of that anyway. I know we've done some studies with like beer and stuff like that where some of those containers have to be a certain color and things like that. Um, with seasoning, I would say if the customers are having trouble distinguishing what's in there, like you might need to hit them over the head with, the fact that it's seasoning or spice,
Yes.
something that's very large on the label. Uh, if that's in fact a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But she did mention that it's a D2C product right now. So I
mm,
imagine it's on shelves with other spices. It might become more clear without
yeah,
having to do more explanation. Okay, we
yeah,
have
definitely.
one like example in the comments. So Susan from Recoup has her product. She put a picture on here, updating my can packaging, trying to figure out the hierarchy and possibly adding the fruit images on there. So this one's what ginger, oh, ginger powered, it says. Okay. Ginger
Yeah.
watermelon tree water. Very cool. That's pretty.
Yeah. It depends on how you want things to play with your consumers. One of the things I would do if I was running a study is um, I'll ask people literally, what's important when you're shopping this sort of category, what messages resonate with you the most, and I'll test a bunch of different messaging across brands from all across the category just to understand like what messages actually resonate with shoppers and then whether those messages are even present on the can or not. If something like flavor is very important in this category, then playing up the flavor imagery might become one of the most important things on the can. So understanding how people visually digest that can. Typically, it's going to be left to right and top to bottom. That's typically what you would see. I've seen lots of examples where that doesn't happen, or people jump across the can because there's a big element here and a big element here. So you can sort of influence where people do look on a can. I would say looking at the picture here, people are going to land on the brand name very quickly. They're probably going to go up to that resilience word and then down to the flavor, which probably is the right order of consumption there. You probably want the brand to break through. You want some benefit to break through, or a sub brand, resilience, that kind of thing breaking through, and then the flavor. Those are probably the three most important things in that category to have breakthrough: the brand, the benefit, and the flavor. And whether that imagery resonates with shoppers, I've seen real imagery, artistic imagery. Those are things you can sort of test on the shelf at a more macro level. What stands out better? What's communicating that product better? And you can literally test that. Um,
So,
it's
yeah.
tough to say. It's tough to provide insight into real art tends to work better than animated art, or it really is category dependent. And I've seen both work really well on different um, products. So
Mhm. Now I know this product is organic, right, Susan?
Uh, yes, that version, that's the old can, old version, which wasn't. That's why it's not on there.
Okay, yeah. So it just reminded me to ask about the like certifications that you would want to have on the front, because I think, I usually see a lot of like non-GMO call outs which catch my attention. And I don't know if there's certain certifications that are more resonant with consumers on the front.
yeah, definitely. It can be a trade-off, right? Like you don't want to show off too many of those things because you're going to detract. Everything you put on the front is going to detract from the potential of everything else on the front. So, and you already have to put a lot of different things on there, especially in Canada. We have, bilingual laws here. So that adds another layer of complication. But communicating things like the size and servings and some of those front of pack materials that are almost non-negotiable, by the time you get up to some of those other things, you might be communicating 6 or 7 different important things on the front of your pack. And already that's getting into the red zone in terms of some of those things will not be noticed within that 1 second of time.
Well, just as an aside, I was listening to a webinar about I think it was fair trade. I can't remember, but they were talking about the recognizability of the different certifications.
Yeah.
And one of them, like I was surprised at, like fair trade was really high. The non-GMO was higher than organic, and like Rainforest Alliance, I think, was the other one that was really high. And I realized that all of those had a pretty clear icon associated with them, so that even if you didn't know what the certification was, like Rainforest Alliance has like a tree frog or
A
something.
tree frog, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like Fair Trade has like a person holding a basket or something like that. And then the non-GMO has a butterfly. And so it's like, even if a customer doesn't understand what the certification is, like maybe those do better because they actually have an image associated with them rather than just saying like USDA organic.
They are, they can, depending on how important those messages are with your consumers or your purchases of your category, it does make sense to prominently place them on the front. Sometimes they make more sense on the back. I've seen a lot of companies now where they're trying to sort of group certifications in together, along the bottom, where it's like 2 or 3 certifications that sort of have a similar look or iconography feel to them. I think that's a really good way of calling out benefits, very quickly. If there really are a lot that you need, like if GMO is important and fair trade is important to your consumers, and you need to call both those things out, you sort of have to. But if you can do it in a more uniform way and group them all together, it makes it a little bit more visually digestible instead of spreading them across the can and or across your product. And I have to look up here for organic and down here for fair trade and over here for non-GMO. That adds seconds that you don't have
Right.
to actually understanding that product. So
Well, and maybe like having all those, like, depends on what, like you said, what your consumer wants. So if your product is in like Erewhon, then maybe those consumers are going to be looking for all these certifications, versus if it's in, similar conventional or like a big box store or something like that, then you're trying to reach people that don't necessarily know what the certifications are, maybe.
For sure, exactly. And I mean, at a high level, the macro standout on a shelf, that's not really going to change retailer to retailer. People are going to notice something that stands out. They're going to not notice something that blends in. That's fairly universal. It's sort of that next layer of comprehending the package and understanding the messaging that's presented on it that really separates different shopper types. So, someone like me, I'm constantly looking for that gluten-free certification because my wife and daughters are gluten-free. So that becomes a very important to my hierarchy, but it's also something that I have no problem looking on the back for, or something like along those lines. If it's a category I'm shopping, it does make it convenient when it's presented out front. Um, and for certain categories, it does make sense. Like if I'm shopping pasta, I want to see the gluten-free pasta clearly called out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where it might not make as big of a difference if I'm shopping in the gummy aisle.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So Stephen asked a question about e-commerce. Any tracking information informed advice on which product images to upload to a marketplace or online retailer? So yeah, how is that different than because you don't have to always have like a dead on, this is exactly what you would see, how it's sitting on the shelf. So do you have any insight there?
That's really category dependent. I've been involved in studies where like showing the actual product, like an image of the whatever it is, has been very effective. So something like maybe granola, showing a handful of granola can be effective. Um, there is a real risk if your package is overly complex that when it's displayed on a screen, you can't read any of it, which is another benefit of simplifying your package and having it really be easy to consume on the shelf. Those same things translate to when someone's browsing packages online. Those same sorts of things and principles resonate, right? Like if the package is very simple and easy to understand, when I'm scrolling through a bunch of different products, that makes sense. And same thing, like if it's in a unique looking color or unique looking package shape or something along those lines, if I'm scrolling a bunch of bags and all of a sudden your product isn't in a bag, yeah, that's probably going to be well noticed. So it really, like, things like that are very category dependent and really competitive dependent. Whatever people are doing, you sort of want to visually do something that's different to stand out, whether that's in store or online.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you do other what was it called? Facial coding, where it's like, what are people looking at in terms of other content too, right?
Yeah. We've worked with facial coding. That works really well with testing dynamic content. Like if you want to test video content or concept testing, like you really get a raw, natural reaction to someone's like, oh, like what's that kind of face? You know what I mean? Like where it's very raw reactions that people have. And facial coding is really interesting because it's so universal. It spans cultures, it spans ethnicities. The way someone looks when they're happy is the same everywhere you are in the planet. It's the same for a blind person who's never seen facial expressions. It's the same for even in primate. They've studied, these universal sort of emotional expressions. So they're very, very powerful. I have found that with content like package design and things like that, it's tougher because it's just not dynamic. So it's almost like, presenting people with a bunch of images tends to work. The packaging sort of fits in there. I've never really used it for that. It's more signage, advertising. It works really, really well for, especially if you're going for a certain reaction. Like if you're trying to get, a happy reaction or a fearful reaction out of someone, you can literally test hundreds of people and, you see a graph on, oh, yep, fear is spiking at this point. You're bang on. So yeah, facial coding is an interesting one, and it seems to be another one that's fairly reliable. It's also bonus another one that can be done online. So eye tracking and facial coding can be done using webcams, which is sort of that space I play in now. In-person eye tracking is amazing, and the fidelity is amazing, and it's terrific, but it's also very, very expensive. Some of the studies I was involved in, the retailer partnered with a brand, and there's lots of people involved, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars and months of work, where now we can, there's even AI based eye tracking that can sort of give you a really instant read on hotspots of, a package or an advertisement. And that AI tech is really actually pretty neat. It does have limitations for sure. It's not going to show you the order in which those things were consumed, or things like that, little subtle things that might help you point towards something else. But I mean, early stage design, AI eye tracking is great. Like, oh, I might need to bump up the size of this picture because it's really not breaking through. Things like that. So.
Right, and you could just like do that digitally, right? I mean, you don't have to have like the product developed and printed and in distribution to be able to try that.
For sure. Yeah. I've worked with companies where we're working with literally a digital mock-up. They don't even exist in store. We'll go into store and take a picture of, where they would likely be, and then just digitally swap their brand in for a brand that's already on the shelf. And then you can swap in a few different designs. So, let's test 3 different designs before you're even in store. We can tell you which one of those designs is more likely to be successful, and you can probably learn from each of those designs to sort of create one new hybrid design that might be better performing than any 3 of them could be individually. And that's been an interesting thing too. We started getting into some virtual reality eye tracking when I was in my past life. And that became very powerful tool for being able to test multiple planograms in rapid succession. So we could have a shopper go into a Target, then shop a Walmart, then shop a Kroger. And we could take the best of all of those planograms and start to create like an entirely new planogram based on the top performing principles. And it's like, okay, now we've dropped you into this aisle that's a hybrid of those 3 retailers, that sort of maximizes the best things about all of them. So yeah.
That's awesome, because I feel like it gives smaller brands a little bit more power, and there's definitely a way to save a lot of headaches and a lot of expense to learn that stuff in advance, rather than go for like buying the material and hiring a designer and getting it distributed and then be like, oh, people aren't really interested in this package.
For sure. And big companies make those mistakes all the time as well, right? Like, I worked on a study once for a sliced bread company, and they had gone through initially a round of focus groups where they were testing, I think, 4 different designs. And one of those designs really emerged as people love this design. It's the top performer. It's sort of universally liked. It has great imagery, all these colors that they are used. We tested it and put it on the shelf. And when it got put on the shelf and all you were exposed to was the butt, the top of the package that they had put all their effort into didn't matter. And this new package design just flopped. Like, it performed much worse than their current pack. So, it was sort of one of those things where eye tracking caught that right away. Noticeability plummeted and purchases plummeted. It was something they corrected right away.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And it kind of ties back to that e-commerce aspect too, of like, you could show the top of the bread on an e-commerce platform, but in the store, they're not all stood up on end like that.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And I've seen lots of examples where companies do sort of assume you're going to be exposed to one part of the package, and then in practice or in one of the retailers they're in, it doesn't turn out like that. That happens a lot in refrigerated and frozen sections, where it's like, oh, we thought we were going to be sort of stacked where you see our front facing, or where, you're going to be exposed to the lid of our tub, but all I'm exposed to is the front, and it doesn't have a flavor. It doesn't have anything on it. I have no idea what this product is. I skip over it. Meanwhile, if you had seen the top, you would immediately be attracted. It's this bright, colorful thing, and it's a complete waste in that retailer.
Yeah, and you don't always have control over where it's placed or how it's merchandised. So And actually, speaking of merchandising, what like have you done any studies with the outer pack? So if there's the shipper or something that they're using as a way to merchandise the product, have you done any studies there?
For sure, that becomes hugely important in a lot of the work I did front of store. So
Yeah.
in convenience in front of store, where it's chocolate bars being put in their shipper, that's pretty much how they're merchandised. So it becomes a very important piece to how they are displayed and tested. And then Costco is another one where you probably want to test shippers and things like that because that's how it's going to be displayed on the shelf. We with Costco testing Costco images online, you tend to use a lot of wider angle shots, or almost, here's a far away shot, then I bring you closer, then we get down to the product level because you almost need to have that reference in Costco, where in a normal retail environment, I might be able to just isolate it to a 4-foot section and show you that,
Hmm.
as
Well,
opposed to showing you a 20-foot section.
yeah, this is also making me think of the recoup packaging too, because you may be having those on, in a cold case individually, or they may be on shelf in like a 4-pack or a 6-pack or something like that. So the design of the outer pack is going to depend on where that is in the store too, probably.
Matters a huge amount. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you want both those things to work well.
Hmm.
I've seen companies where they put so much time on the package of the product itself, and then almost no thought goes into the shipper, and the shipper is what's displayed. It's just like you've missed a huge opportunity here.
Yeah.
you know, all of the effort that went into this great package that no one is exposed to now. The shipper's doing all of the selling. It's doing all of the legwork. It has to be doing just as much work as your package. Otherwise, people aren't even going to reach into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a question on here that I wanted to ask, which is like some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make with their packaging, and I feel like we've already covered some of those. But is there anything that stands out to you, or maybe just like something really unique that you saw that like totally flopped, or maybe did really well that you weren't expecting to?
That brand, the bread one, is always one that I come back to because it just because it resonated so well in their focus groups and their entire internal team was aligned to this one package design. I did just think of another one too. There was oh, it just escaped me. One second. There was another what was it? Oh man, it
Was
was a
it like
great
something with a
example.
pack, with something with a pack on the outside?
Oh, so great example. I was working with a kitchen organization company.
Okay.
Okay. So we were testing Target and Walmart kitchen organization shelf sets. Picture like spice racks and like those clear organization things that go into fridges, things like that. Their original pack design was sort of a light brown color, which, I mean, there's tons of that color in the aisle already, right? All of those bamboo
Yep.
spice racks and things like that. That color exists in there in spades. They were going to switch over to this like very baby blue teal colored packaging, which I thought amazing. That's going to stand out on shelf so well. It's going to do well. We don't need to do this study. You can just launch this package right now. It's going to stand out.
Yeah.
And when we set up the shelf, like it was glowing. It stood out so well compared to some of the other things. And then when we went to actually watch people shop this kitchen section, it's almost completely ignored. Like you can see the heat map almost completely avoids this light blue section. And in talking with people, it's because they had assumed that it was bathroom related because of such a strong connection with that teal color with bathroom. It's almost an association I didn't even know I had in my mind until someone articulated it. And then you're like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then it all falls into place as to why this section's being ignored. It's because I'm shopping for kitchen stuff and that's the bathroom stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm ignoring it, right? Like,
That's so crazy. I mean, and like the psychology, it it's so what I think is so cool about using the eye tracking studies and like studying actual behavior is that like psychology, it plays such a huge role in it that it's not, you're not guessing. It's like people, associate certain things. And I mean, color is a little bit more elusive. You might not have thought of that at
Yeah.
first, but yeah, it's like they're sort of there, or there's like already biases or like cultural things in place
Yeah.
that it's just kind of already in their mind. They're making shortcuts before, without thinking. And that's exactly where you have to catch people, because their brain is going to make shortcuts, and you want to
Yeah.
be something that catches their attention, not something that gets ignored, right? Because
Yeah.
if it doesn't like make sense in their brain, then like we can't see it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Your brain, when you're shopping, it's almost in a constant state of like deselection. Like
Right.
filter out things that I'm not interested in.
Yep.
Right. So that's when, things like liquid death looking like beer in a water aisle sort of breaks you out of that browsing mentality. And it's like, oh, what's that weird looking thing that doesn't belong in this aisle? Those things are what catch people's attention initially. But
Mhm.
then that pack has to do that second job equally as good in terms of communicating what it is, what its benefits are, why you should buy it. It's almost like a salesman that's
Mhm.
holding up a sign to be like, hey, look at me, and then it has to sell someone in 1 or 2 seconds.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I mean, I think that's like a great summation of the conversation, and we are getting close to the end of time here, so I just want to leave a couple minutes in case anybody had any other questions. But I feel like we covered a lot of what I wanted to hear about, and I do also feel like we could talk for another hour because it's just like so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. You could have an hour just on almost any one of these things, just across categories and across retailers. Like there's so much opportunity there um, to test and and to stand out.
Mhm.
And what works in one category will not work in another. I've seen that time and time again. So understanding your category is really paramount. Like what is the messaging that's important to your consumers? And even thinking about, am I trying to attract new consumers? Because the messaging that they want to see might be different than what your current customers already are concerned with. So there's also a balance there in terms of attracting new versus maintaining your old customers too. Like there might be some key message that would attract new customers that you didn't even know about, that
Mhm.
becomes very, very important. So
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I love it. Okay, did we have any other last questions for Rich? I just want to make sure that we answer any questions that you had, and then what's a good way for people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more, or they have any other questions that they didn't get to ask here?
yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. You can DM me. I've talked to lots of people. I've had calls and chats with people about they're going through a package redesign and they just want to pick my brain. I have absolutely no problem with that. I love talking about it. There's only so much help I can offer before it's sort of, well, we should actually test this. But
Mhm.
um, plenty of opportunity to pick my brain. Or they can email me, go on my website, richinsightsresearch.com, or it's just Moniz at richinsightsresearch.com to email me. Feel free to email me and pick my brain.
Awesome. That's a great offer, guys. If you are interested in learning more about these eye tracking studies or how it could help you with your products on shelf, definitely take up Rich on his offer. And if there's anything that comes up afterwards, feel free, reach out to me if you have any other questions or suggestions for how we can better provide insights for you. Please let me know. My email is kate@brandpollinators.com. Definitely sign up for our email newsletter at brandpollinators.com, where we send out information every single week that helps impact-driven brands to grow and scale. So thanks, Rich, so much for being here. It was great chatting with you, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll learned something today.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.